We are joined on the Daily Signal today by Sean Spicer, host of Spicer and Company on Newsmax and author of the book Radical Nation. Sean, it's good to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Great to see you. And let me ask you this just to start off. It is so important, I think, in today's media landscape that we have alternatives to the corrupt corporate media.
Right.
And you're doing that each and every day. Yeah. Tell us about your approach to the news and what you bring to your show.
It's not just my show. I mean, I think all of Newsmax, it's a twofold question. I think we cover issues that I think people are talking about, and it's funny. Literally those conversations, and we try to do it every night on Spicer and Company, which is what I think people are having that conversation, what's concerning them, inflation, immigration, things that are going on in their kids' schools, and have those discussions with leading experts, with parents, with educators or immigration experts, border authorities, economists, and break them down. But they're those conversations and segments that you're not seeing, frankly, on other stations. And so it's funny, I think we get tagged with a lot of pejoratives from the mainstream media. But if you watch the station and watch the segments that we do, I think we frankly cover issues that aren't getting covered. But we bring on guests from all sides. We allow people to have their say. It's just that I think the way that the left has decided to control the narrative, they don't like the idea of anybody injecting a story or an idea into the bloodstream that they don't approve of.
Well, taking a step back then, because we appreciate what you do on a day-to-day basis, but zooming out and looking at the media landscape more broadly, why is it important to have a diversity of sources of information for people you've not only, now that you're in front of the camera, but even when you were behind the camera?
Well, it's interesting. It's funny. I'm a bit of a political hoarder. My wife would use some other words, but I was going through some stuff the other day, sorting out some of the boxes that I've kept. And one of the interesting things was an article I came across through my tenure at the White House that said, of all the things that Spicer did during his tenure as press secretary was diversify the press briefing. And what he meant by that was for so long, and Jen Psaki's gone back to this, which is you call on the front rows, which is the wire services, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the big three networks, right? I looked at it like, there's local TV and local media, there's conservative outlets, there's financial outlets, there's foreign media. There are niche media outlets that equally represent a constituency that has a question or a concern that should get asked. And again, I think that, so to the heart of your question, it's important because I think for too long, there was this idea that a group of folks in the media, right, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and the big three networks controlled what you saw, read, and heard. They controlled the narrative. If it wasn't on their networks, if it wasn't on their paper, it didn't exist. It wasn't a problem. And so the diversity in thought, and I'm a big all of the above guy, right? So I'm at Newsmax. I think we do a great job of doing that. But if you want to read Breitbart or the Daily Caller, whatever, that's great. I think the more the merrier, right? Because the more people can get their information from different places and see something, that's great. The thing that I find is fascinating is this is truly like capitalism at work, right? When I started at Newsmax, we had thousands of people watching every night. Now we're in the hundreds of thousands. And Newsmax has, while we're on all of the major carriers, Fios and Comcast and Dish and Direct, we don't have the same reach as a CNN right now. We're growing all the time, but we're competing with them. 2 years in, my show just crossed its 2-year threshold, and that tells you that Americans are searching out a place like Newsmax and saying, I want to watch this show. I like what I see. And it's 90% of the time when I talk to people, it's word of mouth. I heard it from a friend. I heard it from a family member, somebody that lives down the street from me, watched your show and turned me onto it. And I think that's what's so fascinating about Newsmax. It's not this huge advertising budget that's out there with billboards and whatever. It's people person to person, through social media, through email, through knocking on the door, through conversations they're having at work or at home, that are turning people onto it. And that's what I think is great right now. And I think it's driving the mainstream media nuts, that they don't have the stranglehold on the narrative anymore.
I want to come back to that in just a moment, but I do want to say that as somebody who pays attention to the numbers and the data, what you're saying is absolutely true. And that's why we have decided that it's important to have Heritage Foundation experts on your show and other shows on Newsmax, because that is where the organic growth is. That's where people are turning increasingly to get their news.
Yeah, and well, we love having them on because they are experts and they're some of the best in their fields. I mean, Hans, who handles all
election integrity,
integrity, he's the best in the business, right? I mean, there are folks that you guys have who have for decades been at the forefront of their specific area. And so when we want to break down something, those are the go-to people to talk about, whether it's China or the economy or election integrity, right? These are the go-to people who have been following it, not for a year or two, just got turned on to it for years, in some cases, decades, have been the leaders, the thought leaders in this, and are the people who aren't just writing about it, where policymakers are then turning to and saying, okay, how do we fix this? So we love having them on, not just because they're experts, but because we're ahead of the curve. We want our viewers to be like, hey, this is where the ball's going to bounce to.
Yes, yeah. Well, now, you have that organic growth, but I also feel like there is, particularly with the big media conglomerates, an effort not only maybe on a day-to-day basis to try to take shots at Newsmax, but also, why isn't there more interest in expanding Newsmax to other platforms? I mean, is there a concerted effort on their part to keep you down?
I don't think. I mean, look, the interesting thing I think that's fascinating about Newsmax is that we're the fourth largest news channel out there right now, but we're the only one that you don't need a cable subscription. If you literally have a smartphone or the internet, you can go to newsmax.com. You can go to YouTube. Watch it for free. I've been in Florida with my family, and I had countless people come up to me and say, "Hey, I cut the cord. I don't have cable anymore, but I watch you on Roku or Samsung TV or Vizio or whatever it is, and you're the only ones." So literally, if you don't have cable, or you just have a smartphone and you're walking around, or you just have a computer or whatever, as long as you have an internet connection, you've got access to Newsmax live television, the same as you would if you had cable. And again, if you have cable, that's great. You can go to DirecTV or Dish or Fios or wherever and get us the same way too. But it's really unique because that's where we're able to sort of diversify and break into an audience that a CNN or an MSNBC or even a Fox can't.
That's outstanding. Yeah, particularly at a time when CNN Plus seems to be failing miserably.
Well, literally, as I was coming down in the elevator to this, there is a Variety, one of the trade publications in the entertainment industry, put out saying that they're pulling the plug on CNN Plus. I mean, think about that. This thing has lasted, literally days, and they're already pulling the plug. That tells you everything. Now, I'm shocked that people don't want to know what books Jake Tapper's reading, but that tells you everything you need to know about. Again, going back to capitalism, apparently not a lot of people were that interested.
That's true. I think one of the things that you're also doing is helping to restore trust in media. Yeah. And that is a big challenge because we have a situation now in our country where so many people have decided that they can't trust the traditional sources. Right. So what are the steps that go into your show day to day in terms of identifying those guests and making sure that you are delivering truthful information to your audience?
So I think part of it is, we have multiple calls where we're looking at, what's Congress covering, what's breaking in terms of issues or what's coming up. So we'll look ahead and say, hey, this issue is getting to be a big deal. There's a report coming out. We get pitched a lot. Sometimes there's a report coming out from Heritage and someone will reach out and say, we've got this report that's going to be coming out on immigration or the economy. We'll look at legislation that's coming down the pike. So there's a combination of those kind of things. We'll look at issues. And then the same thing with guests. We'll look and say, okay, who's the big get that we want? Or who's somebody, we had the other day just some parents on from Florida. We had a couple parents on from New Jersey who were embroiled in this whole thing where New Jersey was mandating some new courses. And we wanted to hear from actual parents and said, what's it like up there? Two of them were former educators that had taught in the system. What would you have would you have actually taught this curriculum? So the idea sometimes is to have those conversations that, again, people would probably be having around their dinner table at night and break it down in a way that people go, okay, now I get it. And so it's also, to your point about the facts, that's where the research comes in. So it's looking at and I think that's what frankly makes me somewhat unique as a host, is having worked on Capitol Hill, been in the military, served at the White House, worked on campaigns and at the National Party, is that there's a lot of times where I can say, no, that's actually not how it works. And so we can break down a story and say, while it's being this reported in the Washington Post this way, the reality is it doesn't work like this, or it'll never happen like that, either politically or just in terms of how government operates. And I think that's a unique thing that we bring.
And not even the Washington Post, apparently Piers Morgan.
Well, but look at that issue today, right? The idea that, and I give Taylor Budowich, the president's comms staffer, tremendous credit for doing what most press staffers should always be doing, which is recording that interview, because think about it. I mean, you saw that happen, and it plays into this narrative, oh, Trump got angry and stormed off. And then it's like, nope, here's the tape. And here's how it was edited deceptively to make the president look bad. So I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he released it. And you had NBC News actually having to admit, well, gosh, no, that's not how it went down. And when you've got NBC News siding with President Trump, you know that something's really amiss.
Yeah, speaking of NBC and MSNBC, I've seen you tweet about this.
Yeah.
Jen Psaki,
right,
who's promoting her future employer while serving in the White House.
Right. This is unprecedented, and with all due respect, I'm glad Jen's got a new job. It's a tough job being press secretary. I wish her all the best. I'm glad that she's found a soft landing, and I think that that's great. And I honest to God mean it. She was very helpful to me, Josh Earnest, and her when I was transitioning her. So I wish her the best. But you can't then continue to serve. You can't sit at that podium knowing that your future colleagues are sitting there. They can't embarrass you, so they're not going to ask you tough questions. You don't want to do anything. I mean, this is so unethical and wrong. She is the first press secretary to ever go straight from the podium to hosting a show. I waited 2.5 years, and it's not a question of that. Even if she wanted to go straight from, again, God bless her, go for it. But then step down. You can't continue to do this and go on this farewell publicity tour as press secretary where you're continuing to interact with the folks that are going to be your colleagues.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And one final question for you, and on the personal or more humorous side, I've got to ask you about Bunnygate.
Yeah.
So you dressed up as the Easter Bunny in the George W. Bush administration. Yeah. So President Biden obviously has this incident with the Easter Bunny. Just your thoughts on what happened there.
Well, the funny thing about it is, one, it was really interesting because when that happened, of course, I saw a lot of stories come out sort of noting my sort of history. And it's funny because so many of them are wrong. And I just say that because the interesting thing is that because of the nature of the job, it's very hot. So you only do it for about an hour. And so this idea that they were like, oh, this was Spicer when he was back. And it was like, I did it for an hour. I didn't, like, they were like, there was these pictures that they would show from 2008. It's like, oh, that was him. Not true. But the idea that a press staffer, in that case, walked over to the President Biden while he was answering questions about Afghanistan and basically moved him away, and no one thought that was a problem. I look at that and go, guys, like, you're the press. You're supposed to be outraged by something like this.
Yeah. Sean Spicer, keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks,
it's great to have you back on the Daily Signal.
Always good to be here.